Welcome back to the channel. This is Trinity Storm and you are watching third part of What If Naruto Becomes Demonic Samurai. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe to the channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
A young girl was busying herself with the task of rolling a large ball of snow in order to complete her miniature snowman. She was excited to show her mom her finished project. The addition of the snowman's head promptly elicited a giddy, childlike clap of joy from the delighted youngster. Once she had collected herself, she yelled for her mother at the house's rear door. "It's a snowman, I told my mother, Mommy, Mommy." The mom grinned and walked out, heading in the direction of her kid. "Aw, how sweet. You did a fantastic job, honey." The little girl smiled with her eyes closed and asked, "Thanks, Mommy. Can we go get food now?" The lack of a reply piqued the little girl's interest, and she opened her eyes. The child was initially curious, but her fear quickly grew when she saw her mother lying face down in the snow with a bloody wound to the back of her skull. The baby cried out to God and then collapsed onto her mother's body. She was muttering the same thing over and over as she sobbed. A child yells, "Mommy! Wake up, please wake up. Mother!" The killer suddenly materialized from behind the kid and peered down at the racked adult in front of him. The assassin struck his target in the same cold manner he had the mother. The child's cries abruptly stopped, and the killer felt a smirk twitch at his lips. The shadowy figure quietly slipped away into the night to join the rest of the workers. Children's screams echoed throughout the village, waking everyone up to the horror that had befallen them. Dead bodies littered the streets, and dark figures danced in the darkness. The village preacher herded everyone into the church in the hopes that their faith would protect them when they had nowhere else to go. People inside started praying, some quietly, some not, and then they heard chains rattling and a pounding on the front door. After a minute, there was complete silence, leading some to gleefully assume they had escaped the massacre unscathed. As the church was suddenly consumed by flames, the happy faces turned to terrified screams. The assassins stepped outside, exchanged nods, and moved on to the next settlement. There were still two more available. After breakfast, while sipping his morning tea at a local shop, Naruto was rudely interrupted by Yuki. As quickly as she could, the fox yipped and growled what she had heard. Yuki slowed down after Naruto told her to, took a deep breath, and repeated her message. Naruto finished his report, narrowed his eyes, and stood from the Seiza position. Naruto placed the necessary funds on the table and turned to leave. "Yuki, try to follow one of those assassins home to see if we can coordinate a raid. While that's going on, I'll be chatting it up with Mifune Dono." Simultaneously with Naruto's hasty entrance to the general's office, the fox yipped and bolted from the shop. His stoic demeanor after being let in told Mifune that something major had happened. To paraphrase, "What has Yuki told you, Uzumaki-san?" Naruto, at attention as he reported the news, said, "3 villages were attacked, and enemy troops are moving in to occupy them. One of the 3 is a major one, and it has been overrun, but I think it would be to our advantage to take it and use it as a field base," Naruto said with a bow. "It's on your orders, Mifune Dono." The Iron Country's leader chuckled and said, "If you can create a strike team, then by all means Uzumaki-san. I advise, however, taking Hiroto along as he would be best suited to stay at the field base. He did fight alongside me during the last 2 wars, after all." To quote the late great, High General Mifune, "It shall be done." It was at this point that Mifune nodded and said, "You are dismissed." Mifune laughed after Naruto left, then sighed, knowing full well what he would find in that village. The elder samurai quavered as the horrors of the First War, which he had tried to forget, flooded back into his consciousness. To paraphrase, "I fear that the darkness within the boy will awake again." Such an atrocity is what I witnessed that night. The team came together in no more than 5 minutes. After locating the forces, Hiroto and Naruto went to the nearby barracks to join them. They knew what to do when they saw Naruto and Hiroto dressed for battle and staring down their opponents with no visible emotion. The guards finally opened the main village gate 5 minutes later, and all 500 soldiers sprinted in the direction of the largest civilian village that had been attacked. 20 minutes later, they arrived to find the streets littered with bodies and the air heavy with the silence of the dead. Hiroto nodded as he took a look at Naruto, curious to see what the young samurai could accomplish. Without hesitation, Naruto ordered, "Go into each home and search for any survivors. If you come across any bodies, take them outside the village so that we can all help lay these poor souls to rest." Am I clear? They all shouted, "Hi, Master Uzumaki." To which the target groaned and Hiroto laughed. Naruto and Hiroto, however, decided to investigate something they noticed upon entry while the rest of the forces busied themselves with their mission. The smoke on the horizon was barely visible, but that was enough to know there was a fire. With every step they took deeper into the village, Naruto's anger at the loss of so many innocent lives only grew. Sighing, Naruto said, "War. My master is right. It seems to be a cycle that never ends, and it will always cost innocent lives. At some point in the not-too-distant future, perhaps everyone will realize that war brings nothing but pain, and then peace will reign supreme." Kurama's container started talking, and he couldn't help but grin. "You make me think of my dad, and for that I am eternally grateful to you, Naruto Uzumaki." When Hiroto and Naruto finally reached their destination, they lost all control of their rage. They saw a charred shell of a church, with only the door and its frame still standing. Charred bodies of adults and children, including infants, filled the interior. There was a padlock and chain around the door's handles, and while the church did have windows, they were too small to escape through. One person was happy about this anger because they thought they could use it to break free, but Naruto controlled their reaction. Yami screamed, "Damn you, Naruto! I will have my revenge, I will take what is rightfully mine. You hear me? Your body will be mine." But no one could make out a word of what he was babbling about in his insanity. The sight before the old samurai made him sigh. "I haven't seen anything so despicable since the First War. They're all traitors, and they'll all pay the ultimate price for following Takeshi." Unconsciously, Naruto clutched the necklace Tsunade had given him as he entered the charred church. While doing so, Hiroto kept an eye on the young samurai to see what he would do. He sincerely wished that Naruto would never forget the scene, as it represented a profound insight into the nature of life. A flash of light reflected off a shiny surface caught the Uzumaki's eye as he surveyed the burned bodies. Naruto picked up the object, brushed off the soot, and brought it close to his face to examine it. The necklace from which it had been detached had been burned, along with the string that had held the pendant. There was something peculiar about the necklace, as it appeared to be broken on one side. The artifact resembled a building in a small town perched high in the trees. Naruto put the item in his pocket, figuring he might need it later, and then went to find a string to attach it to so he could wear it in honor of the fallen. Hiroto's concerned tone as a father roused Naruto from his daze. "Uzumaki-san, are you alright?" "Huh? Uzumaki-san, I asked if you were okay," Hiroto stated once more. Naruto replied mournfully, "Could be better, Hiroto dono, but I will be fine." He quickly diverted his attention, however. "Shall we begin the burials at this time?" The wise man agreed, and the villagers worked together to dig graves and bury their dead for several hours. The samurai had lost track after 100 funerals and rites. They were only concerned with making sure that the bodies of innocent villagers were laid to rest, and not with any petty body count. By the time nightfall arrived, everyone was worn out. In spite of this, everyone's nerves were on edge because they had not yet encountered any hostile forces. Like any good shinobi, the enemy seemed to be watching and waiting in the shadows. After recharging for a while, we set up perimeters, designated homes as barracks, and made the town hall our command center. An assassin in the shadows spotted a samurai smoking outside the town hall as Hiroto and Naruto were planning their strategy for the first battle of this war. The only problem was that he could be seen by anyone near the town hall. The killer shrugged, raised his shuriken, and fired. The samurai was blindsided when the piece of steel hit him in the forehead. Hiroto and Naruto both stopped talking abruptly when they saw this, both of them incredulous that they hadn't noticed this person before. This caused serious concern, as they realized they were unprepared to deal with such an adversary. The two senior samurai yelled, "Contact!" as they pulsated their ki to alert the others. The enemy launched their attack from this location, and chaos ensued. The leading edge of these forces fired fireballs, while the rear increased their speed and power with great breakthrough. Obviously, if this battle turned out to be as bad as they feared, the entire village would be reduced to ashes. Hiroto shouted, "Fight with honor, my brethren," before charging into battle against the initial foes. To prepare for what he was about to do, Naruto shut his eyes and turned off his emotions. A few seconds later, Naruto opened his eyes, revealing a pair of emotionless blue icebergs. Calmly approaching his enemies, the Uzumaki rested one hand on the Honjo Masamune. The samurai did not let being outnumbered by 2-1 stop them from doing their duty. Most of Naruto's opponents were initially taken aback by his cool demeanor, but they quickly rushed in with kunai brandished, and the rest hung back, waiting for the right moment to use a jutsu. As he saw them charging at him, Naruto assumed a semi-seated position in preparation for his Taiteiza no Byu. Naruto dodged a left-handed blow with an Urokageshi, slicing the attacker in half between the arm and the face. After being severed in two, the enemy's body fell to the snowy ground, which had taken on a dark red hue. Naruto then used Namigeshi, which also slashed through the attacker's back and killed them. All of Naruto's subsequent blows were his own invention, and they focused on either jabs to the heart or other vital organs, or slicing blows intended to decapitate. After Naruto finished, 15 people were dead at his feet and the Hanjo was back in its sheath. Those who stayed behind to use a jutsu were left without an opportunity because it took Naruto only 5 seconds to complete his mission. The enemy could not make out anything about Naruto. Naruto said coldly, "I give you the chance to surrender yourself before I sully my blade once again." The question, "What shall be your choice?" The Uzumaki unexpectedly dove, letting a huge water dragon pass overhead. Naruto looked at the coward who dared to try and kill him with Kurama's eyes and a touch of killing intent. "You pick." Badly. The next thing the foes knew, their opponent had moved behind them and was drawing a sword. 20 people stood in line to use their jutsu, and once the blade was in place, all of them bled profusely from different wounds. No one managed to escape. There were deaths, injuries, and jutsu explosions that Naruto was oblivious to. Instead, Naruto was thinking strategically about how to lead his platoon through the night by focusing on the upcoming battle and the entire battlefield. But then an air bullet shattered his concentration, and Naruto cut it in half with lightning speed. With an extra boost of ki, Naruto ran straight at the nearest cluster of jutsu users. Naruto evaded, flipped over, and blocked jutsu with a ki-enhanced fist, all with the grace of a cat. The onlooking allies were suitably impressed, while the onlooking adversaries began to question their own competence. A massive earth spear impaled Naruto's right shoulder as he landed for a finishing blow on the group of 5. The 5 adversaries swooped in like a pack of wolves, unleashing a barrage of kunai that proved fatal. Of course, if Naruto hadn't activated the Kyuubi cloak to pulse his chakra, that's exactly what would have happened. After removing the spear from his shoulder, Naruto grinned at his enemies' terrified expressions as the wound closed quickly. The long canines on Naruto's grin drew attention to himself as he said, Someone might say, "It seems thou have woken the beast from its slumber. Whatever shall you do?" The Uzumaki asked this with an arched brow and a look that sent people running for cover. It was a mad look, one that grew expressionless as he watched the enemy flee in front of him. Unsheathing Hanjo and setting it to one side, Naruto simply said, "Foolish." Naruto landed in front of the cowards after a burst of speed and a jump, katana raised. The oncoming foe froze as a chill ran down their spines. As he passed the group, Naruto sheathed Hanjo and closed his eyes. As soon as his foes got within range, the blade closed, sending them splattering to the ground in pieces of varying sizes and bloody gore. After a long sigh, Naruto smirked and said, "Never underestimate the power of ki." As Naruto prepared to assist in protecting the town and making sure the other samurai received aid, he sensed a negative mood hanging over Hiroto's head. With wide, worried eyes, the Uzumaki sprinted as fast as he could in an effort to reach the elder in time. He was having a blast with Hiroto because no one else could keep up with his level of expertise. Like Naruto, he deftly deflected the incoming jutsu and kept on his path of destruction. At various points along the route, participants were beheaded, dismembered, or stabbed in the heart. As the number of foes began to dwindle and some of them ran away in fear, Hiroto turned around because he sensed a signature following him. A sudden burst of orange filled his field of vision just as he was about to close his eyes and eagerly greet death. A muffled thump of a body hitting the snowy ground followed the snap and the sound of something penetrating flesh. As they scowled at the one they sensed, Naruto and Hiroto looked down. Another killer had struck. General Mifune will be extremely dissatisfied with these developments because we are not ready to face such an enemy, Hiroto Dono. The wise man nodded gravely, to think one person can go undetected by us until it is almost too late. He paused, seemingly considering this. Uzumaki-san, how did you pick up on that? Does your furry friend have special senses? Amidst the vast, snowy wilderness, Naruto gestured with his hands to indicate his senses of sight and hearing. Too many nosy people around, Hiroto understood. The old soldier beamed at that. Hiroto remarked to the young samurai in front of him, "You are very wise for a person so young, Uzumaki-san. I believe I will recommend to Mifune that you be promoted to commander." Before Naruto could answer, he and Hiroto turned around simultaneously to find themselves surrounded by numerous foes. Some of them were armed to the teeth with jutsu that could kill on contact. "Guys, look at our good fortune, we ambushed 2 samurai." The old samurai laughed, catching the opponent off guard, but putting a smile on Naruto's face with just 3 words. To ask, "Shall we dance?" The jutsu, a synthesis of all the elements, was cast at the precise moment the 2 samurai moved. By using the Kyuubi cloak to force everyone back toward the caster, Naruto eliminated the risk of being hit for anyone who didn't manage to dodge. Then, using Aikido, Hiroto and Naruto danced around one another. This dance, however, was intricate because they had to work together to ensure a successful outcome. When an enemy threw themselves at Naruto, he punched them in the trachea, collapsing it and leaving the man to suffocate to death. He repaid the favor by throwing an opponent into a foe that had sneaked up on Hiroto from behind. It was a relentless pattern of dodging, weaving, ducking, and throwing interspersed with the occasional ki-enhanced jab to a vital area. Naruto and Hiroto danced a passionate tango for 2 minutes before smilingly shaking hands. They paid no mind to the 30 or more dead people that had piled up around them. "You danced beautifully, and I have no doubt that you will be promoted because of it." When Naruto first started classes, he was going to object, but then he started worrying about his reputation. Naruto shrugged and smiled, "Well, they already call me master anyway. I was a 12-year-old master when the war broke out, and now I'm on the fast track to becoming a commander." Hiroto laughed heartily and slapped Naruto on the back, saying, "Ho ho. Harumasa definitely knows how to pick him." With a wistful grin on his face, Naruto surveyed the battlefield in front of him as his hand returned to his Masamune. The question was posed, "Shall we finish this dance of death, Hiroto Dono?" "Uzumaki-san, you stole my line when you said, 'Let's go.'" Fighting back the enemy took nearly an additional hour, and it was not without casualties. 500 volunteers were only able to bring themselves to leave the battlefield 420 times. A gloomy mood descended as they gathered their dead and carried them to the main village for proper burial. Naruto was instructed to return to the main village with the others so that Mifune could be briefed on the mission. Hiroto and the others would secure and fully operate their field base while they were gone. The office of Mifune. The general sat down with a cup of tea and a stack of scouting reports. Mifune was focused on his work, but he worried that something terrible must have happened to the group that Naruto and Hiroto were leading because they hadn't reported in. Thankfully, a commotion outside the front gate prompted him to get up and walk over to the nearby window to see what was going on. Mifune's eye closed as he saw multiple bodies being brought in, and a heavy sigh escaped his mouth. But when he opened his eyes, there was Naruto standing in front of a rising sun. Mifune grinned, despite the fact that the boy's armor and face were covered in blood. The general returned to his desk and sat down, anticipating the arrival of his guests. A few minutes later, as he sat sipping his morning brew, the doorbell rang. "Enter." In compliance with his superior's orders, Naruto closed the door and bowed to his commander. "Mifune Dono, as you saw, we were able to secure the field base, but at great cost." Blood had dripped into Naruto's right eye, so he paused briefly to clean it. "Despite being outnumbered, we fought bravely and ultimately prevailed to the point where the enemy retreated in defeat." The general nodded in agreement, but picked up on Naruto's hesitance when he used the word enemy. "Are we facing an unexpected enemy, as your tone suggests?" Mifune's brow furrowed as he asked the question. Nothing Naruto said corroborated the samurai chief's suspicions. "So that we don't have to keep repeating ourselves, I see, but before you elaborate, let me get my commanders in here." Naruto agreed, and he sat down on a couch nearby to rest for a while. Seeing a bloodied Naruto and a worried Mifune, Fukui, Hideki, and Takuma rushed into the office a minute later. Naruto opened his eyes as he sensed the commander's approach, and he grimly recounted the battle and the assassin who nearly killed Hiroto. The inability to detect the enemy until it was almost too late was the biggest source of concern. Negative emotion sensing, which I get from my Kyuubi cloak, was the only way I was able to locate the enemy in time, but by then it was almost too late. They all agreed with what Naruto said. In his usual measured tone, Fukui asked his student, "My student," adding, "Beyond you being able to sense them, if only just, is there even a way to combat someone who lives in the shadows?" After giving it some thought, Naruto frowned and shook his head. If we can locate their stronghold, we can wait for the right moment to spring an ambush on them. Before Naruto could continue, Takuma cut him off. If we can eliminate these shadows, it will greatly weaken the enemy. Hideki agreed, but he wanted to share his thoughts. Yes, but can we surprise the surprise attackers? What's more, how do we deal with the other towns? Hideki met the eyes of the young samurai directly. If these assassins are as skilled as you say, young Uzumaki, then knowing where they strike next will be extremely difficult. I suggested that Yuki try to shadow one of the killers, if that helps. Assuringly, Naruto spoke up. If I know her at all, she'll bring back some information that will be incredibly helpful to our plans. Remember, an assassin is a planner, and planners need paper. The assassin said, but assassins leave no trace, Uzumaki-san. Mifune put it succinctly. Everyone nodded because they knew it was true, and then, after an uncomfortable silence that seemed to go on forever, Mifune stood up and walked to the nearby window. If there are any villages left unconquered, we will send a platoon to take care of them. A signal system and guard towers will be built to warn of any potential attackers. To confront the commanders and Naruto, Mifune whirled around. The same is true of this town. This is a band-aid solution at best, but it's the best we can do while these killers are still at large. Mifune looked at Naruto with a grin on his face. And I'm hoping your friend can get us the information we need. The Uzumaki nodded and was about to leave to aid the newcomers when Fukui changed his mind. Today, my student, you have done Iron Country a great service. Sleep well, for tomorrow is a day of mourning for everyone. Naruto nodded in understanding rather than argue with his master, and he stood up to take the necklace fragment out of his pocket and rub his fingers over it. Over 100 innocent civilians have been buried with my assistance, and I have seen the burned bodies of those who sought refuge in a church. Says Naruto, with regret. As the old adage goes, war is hell, master. It never ends until the last battle is won. After bowing to Mifune, Naruto put the necklace back in his pocket. With that, by your leave, General. The adult nodded sadly, and when the door finally closed, everyone in the office laughed at the 12-year-old's profound words. And Takeshi. The rebel leader was pacing up and down his office, his thoughts consumed by the mystery of why one of the squads hadn't returned from the Occupy mission. Takeshi was deeply immersed in his thoughts, but he felt no anxiety at any point. Who knows if it was pride or carelessness? Takeshi had just finished thinking this when he was interrupted by a knock on the door of his office. The doorbell rang, and he opened it, expecting to see one of the squad leaders. In his right hand, Jiro held the neck of a severely injured soldier as he stood there with a scowling face. Takeshi took a step to the side as Jiro threw the man into the room. The man was missing his left arm from the elbow down and had a deep gash across his stomach. Takeshi was shaken out of his stupor by the thump of the nearly lifeless soldier's body hitting the hardwood floor, followed by the soldier's groans of pain. The question, what does this mean? Takeshi's enraged gaze landed on Jiro's. The judge warned, Jiro, you better have a damn good explanation or so help me, your end will not be pleasant. As I put it, I found most of the occupying squad had been killed by a small number of Mifune's men while others retreated into the forest to set up camp and treat their wounds. Jiro explained coolly, unfazed by the death stare he was given. On your orders, I slaughtered everyone except this man, who kept babbling about a demon. So you're telling me that? Takeshi stomped on the injured soldier, causing him to cry out in distress. That an army weaker than yours defeated and pushed them back. Before returning his attention to his leader, Jiro coldly regarded the writhing soldier. From a distance, I observed Takeshi-sama, I followed your instructions and was shocked by what I found. A green light was given by Takeshi, so I guess we can keep going. The samurai were well versed in countering and detecting shinobi techniques. Maybe the boy with the blonde hair who you've been watching has been the key to victory. Blonde hair and demon are interchangeable terms. The man on the floor, who was coughing up blood at random intervals, suddenly started talking. There was no regret, just a haze. Aku, Aku, Aku. Akuma no Senshi. Ak. With the man's blood soaking into the wooden floor, Jiro finally slit his throat, putting an end to his incessant babbling. Instruct one of your spies to report to the village chief. Put this kid to death, please. The rebel leader interrupted Jiro before he could ask his question. To paraphrase, I don't give a fuck what Toby said, this Akuma has already done enough damage. Takeshi grimaced as he turned away from the growing pool of blood and stared out the window. And could you please tidy up this mess? The killer bowed and carried the body out of the building. He ran the 20 minutes to the Assassin's Guild, where he gave the password through a small opening in the door's top. Jiro entered quietly and nodded to the doorman as he made his way through the maze-like corridors of the guild. The assassin group's leader eventually made it to one of the bunk areas, where he found several of his fellow killers busy cleaning their gear. Looking around, he saw a single person dozing off on a bunk, gear organized neatly on the chest beneath the bed. The sleeping assassin opened his eyes and gazed lazily in Jiro's direction as soon as the latter reached the cot. As in, you need something, Jiro? Her eyes felt heavy, so she yawned and rubbed them. Yes, Akuma's death is ordered by the man upstairs. The now-awake killer raised an eyebrow in Jiro's direction. When asked, who's pissed off Takeshi now? A blonde-haired samurai with blue eyes. His name is Akuma no Senshi. The question was, so, a kid, right? The assassin grinned when he received no reply. You send me out to kill a noob, are you kidding me? I'm not interested, find someone else. When she was about to drift off to sleep, Jiro kicked the cot, causing her to open her eyes wide and glare at him. It's possible he's just a kid, Jiro began, his anger rising at the assassin's callousness. However, he has already contributed to the successful counterattack of a force twice his size. Oh. The lady blinked her eyes in astonishment. As the saying goes, so that's what's got Takeshi's knickers in a knot. Jiro's ire peaked as she began to laugh at his jokes. He grabbed the cot and tipped it over with a low growl coming from his throat. The commotion temporarily distracted the other guards in the room, but they quickly resumed their duties. You can quote me on that. Fine, fine, I know when I need to leave. The killer said as she straightened up and dusted off her uniform. Simply finish what you're working on. Jiro snapped back an angry response while indicating the corridor. Dismissed. She gathered her weapons and other belongings and left the bunkhouse, making her way to the map room. On the large circular table inside, Mifune and the others could study a map of the central samurai village. Due to the high level of security, the information was not particularly detailed, but it was sufficient for the task at hand. She studied the map, knowing that if Takeshi was victorious, he would dispatch additional assassins to scout the main village in preparation for a coordinated, decisive attack that would end the war. The next 3 days. After Naruto and Hiroto's successful counterattack 3 days ago, the samurai have been taking turns traveling between the main village and the field station. During the same time period, the fortification of civilian villages was also finished. Guard towers were set up on the outskirts of the settlements, with patrols conducting random checks inside and outside. The townspeople, to the samurai's great surprise, provided them with a warm reception, with some even offering them a hot meal and a safe place to sleep. But not every samurai was thrilled by this development. Veterans of World War II often probed civilians for the rationale behind their hospitality. Their response? You protect our house without question, so the least I can do is provide you with food and shelter. They were grateful for the compliments, but most of the veterans of the Second World War decided to camp nearby, with a small fire pit so as not to alert the enemy. The towers in the middle of the settlement were topped with wooden teepees that could be lit on fire in case of a crisis. The other villages and Mifunes would be alerted once one was lit. Mifune was completely confident in his troops, despite the fact that they would have to wait for reinforcements. A samurai would never run from a fight. Instead, they would fight to the death and die by the blade, as was their custom. Mifune, Naruto, and the other commanders returned to the main village to plan their next move in response to the outposts they had discovered. Most were strategically placed to guarantee Takeshi's troops established a foothold after a civilian village was empty. Much discussion led to the conclusion that these outposts would be attacked in a predetermined pattern in an effort to weaken Takeshi's defenses. Yuki had returned from her mission with information about the assassins, but it was not what Mifune and the others had hoped to hear. At first, they believed that the assassins had set up shop in one of the outposts. However, that presumption was discarded after hearing Yuki out. Throughout Iron Country, numerous guilds were established in close proximity to one another but at a safe enough distance from an outpost to avoid suspicion. This unsettling fact did not deter Mifune and the others from their plan to eliminate the threat posed by the assassins. Simultaneous raiding of the guilds. However, this feat would require leaving most civilian villages unguarded, something that would make Takeshi salivate. Mifune felt the weight of the decision-making options on his already stretched shoulders. Mifune was torn between two options. He could abandon his people to the wrath of Takeshi's followers, or he could organize a raid that would give them a significant military advantage. Mifune has no solution at the moment, but he is aware that he must make a choice soon or face the consequences. A woman with white skin, green eyes, and brown hair pulled back in a ponytail just approached the village's main gate. She was dressed like a local resident of Iron Country, with clothes that would protect her from the freezing temperatures and never-ending snowfall. The guards checked her identification and patted her down for Shinobi gear as soon as she arrived at the gates. After checking her identification and finding nothing suspicious, the guards let her through. I made it inside. Where's that blonde jerk? This is what she was pondering. So, where would I be right now if I were a samurai? The woman smiled wryly. Cup of tea. Keeping up appearances, she asked for directions and eventually found the shop, where the mostly samurai clientele gave her a momentary stare before returning to their business. As she looked around the shop, she noticed a young boy with blonde hair at a table with an elderly man. That's what I'm aiming for, and the old man must be his master. This could be trickier than I'd anticipated. She found a table away from the main action but close enough for the waitress to come and take her order of green tea with jasmine and no sugar. Have you improved today, my dear pupil? Naruto followed Fukui's lead and asked before taking a sip of tea. As he placed the cup back on the saucer, Naruto smiled at the worried expression. Hi, but it will take a very long while to get what I saw out of my head. As they drank their tea, they sensed an unfamiliar presence and their warrior instincts went into overdrive. Even though war had returned to their village, the samurai and the villagers still exuded an air of comfort and peace. This aura, however, was cold and dark, almost murderous in nature. When they locked eyes, they subconsciously communicated that they shouldn't say anything because they were being watched. However, they decided to release some to gauge the response of their intended victim. Mifune wants to meet with you after the meeting because he heard that Hiroto had recommended you for the position of commander. Fukui said cheerfully. Hi, she asked, but do I really deserve it, master? Naruto put down his tea and paused for a moment. I'm just a kid, and I've got enough on my plate as it is. After Fukui finished the rest of his tea, he put the cup down and gave his student a wry grin. But you were instrumental in leading a successful counterattack against an army twice as large as your own. What you've done is incredible for a kid your age. Naruto's cheeks flushed a little bit at the compliment. Think, my student, of everything you've done to help us win this war so far. Naruto stared thoughtfully into his teacup for a moment before understanding what his master was trying to teach him. Yes, master, I realize that my insecurity stems from the fact that I haven't yet discovered who I am. As he poured the last of his tea into the saucer, Naruto made his statement. I'm going to have a quick chat with Mifune and then get back to work. Maybe I'll figure out who I am in this war. There was a lot of truth in what Naruto had said, and Fukui nodded in agreement. War may seem like an obstacle to some, but to us samurai, it is simply an unexpected bend in the path that we take. Master, does this road ever dead end? Naruto inquired. It seems like it would take a lifetime to find yourself. You've asked a very astute question, my dear student. Death by sword or old age, with a full life behind them, are the two possible conclusions to a samurai's journey. Fukui stated in a businesslike tone, then cracked a smile. As the general put it, go now, General Mifune is expecting you. When I asked him if he was leaving, he nodded and stood up from the Seiza position. While doing so, Fukui stole a quick glance at the person sitting quietly 3 tables away, sipping tea. Nothing was felt during our conversation. Fukui's brow furrowed thoughtfully. Since his future is still being shaped, I might let my student handle this and see how he does. Fukui finished paying for his and Naruto's tea and got up to read the daily scouting reports as soon as he had that idea. The killer spent the next 2 weeks studying Naruto for clues. Every morning at sunrise, Naruto would head to the training grounds. After that, he'd head back home for about 45 minutes before leaving again for the next training ground, where he'd instruct students in samurai arts and the like.
Naruto would either return home for lunch or visit the local tea house to catch up with the other samurai and discuss the latest developments in the war.
He probably had a meeting or went to the library after lunch. The rest of the day was spent doing a mix of these things before retiring for the evening. The tea shop was the only place Naruto visited that wasn't heavily guarded. The killer waited across the street, newspaper in hand, and saw her mark leave the tower and make his way to his usual lunch spot, a tea shop. But she did observe that the young samurai's expression was either angry or emotionless. Emotions in the samurai. I just don't get it. Just as Naruto entered the shop, the assassin finished her thoughts and stood up. As in, Naruto my boy, back for more I see. The owner of the tea shop, a retired samurai in his 90s, made a jubilant declaration, but his enthusiasm faded when he saw the boy's face. It's sad to say it, but Sai Takeshi's picked up more huh? To which Naruto nodded and took a seat. 2 more, yeah. And innocent people are still being killed. To paraphrase, I've seen my fair share of loss in my day, lad. As they smiled at each other, the owner put a comforting hand on Naruto's right shoulder. To paraphrase, however, I see a great future ahead for Iron Country, one which starts with you. Naruto sat back in his chair and gave a slight nod but said nothing. The proprietor had been through what Naruto was going through. He had fought in both wars. His smile hardened as he patted Naruto on the shoulder once more. What's the usual then? To which they typically respond, hi, the usual. While the shopkeeper went to prepare the tea, Naruto buried his head in his hands and sighed. A scouting party reported, 2 more villages lost and skirmishes have increased between our scouting parties and Takeshi's troops. The truly massive one is still to come. Saddened, Kurama chimed in. I've seen more than my share of death, Kit. When he saw the person who had been following him enter the shop, Naruto mentally nodded and looked up. He grinned, confident that the best was yet to come. To paraphrase Shakespeare, your tea, Naruto. The proprietor said cheerfully as he placed the cup and saucer on the desk. Do you need anything else? Naruto indicated the newcomer, a woman. When asked if they could have another, you mind if I make another for her? Naruto pointed at someone, and the shopkeeper narrowed his eyes and said, hi, I will get right on that. Naruto noticed the discreet hand signal the old man made and smiled as the owner returned to the kitchen. Help was within touching distance. Naruto sat sipping tea and warily observed the approaching woman. The samurai saluted him, hello, Samurai-san. Someone in the civilian population initiated the action. Can I have a seat with you and talk about what you do for a living? I'm really considering signing up for this. Naruto put down his teacup and gestured ahead of himself. I've already ordered a free cup for you, so please don't worry about that. Expressing gratitude, thank you. She sat down at the same time that Naruto placed his wakizashi, invisibly, on his lap. Naruto began, about my profession, but he paused to allow the shopkeeper's daughter to thank him for the tea. If you've been following me around for more than 2 weeks, you'll understand why I say. You seem quite fond of it. Ah, I apologize deeply Samurai-san, I was only trying to understand the profession I would be entering. She sat back and smiled brightly as she sipped her tea, clearly not bothered by her nerves. No need to apologize. You can call me Naruto. After taking a sip of his tea, Naruto put the cup down. Before we get started, he said, why are you interested in the samurai, also are you in it for revenge or a new way of life? In their words, my parents died recently, and I have no means of supporting myself financially. Saddened, the killer took a sip from her cup. To quote, I thought if I joined the samurai, I could earn the respect of Mifune and show that a female has what it takes. Mifune is an old man, but he has seen a lot in his time. When Naruto sensed a shift in the assassin's energy, he tightened his grip on his wakizashi. As Bushido teaches us, vengeance is not the path of the warrior. The speaker exclaimed, you mean I have a shot? She cast a startled glance at Naruto. Hi, but maybe we could get back on topic, suggested Naruto, nodding. The killer smiled to himself and nodded his agreement. She anticipated the necessity of hedging her bets. Is there a samurai training academy? And, how exactly do I become a member? Unfortunately, training is secret because it is up to the master to pass on their knowledge. But Mifune will hook you up with one no problem. Inquiring minds want to know, and how many years would this take? As his teacup got low, Naruto shrugged and frowned. He turned his head to call for service and caught a glimpse of the woman putting something in his glass. I want to try something new, so please, Kurama, neutralize that poison. It's no sweat, but you owe me, Kit. What do you need, exactly? A moderate teething ring. Naruto's internal temperature rose, really. Yuga fine. Here. Kurama saw the Uchiha materialize in front of him, and then grinned as the fox pounced on it and began ripping it apart. The assassin was confused by Naruto's chuckle and wondered what was so funny. "Have you got a joke, Naruto?" While having another cup of tea poured for him, he shook his head. "I was just struck by a humorous recollection. Do you have any more queries?" Naruto spent 5 minutes fielding questions, but he didn't reveal much. The assassin's anger rose as a result of giving the bare minimum and the poison's failure to work, both of which pleased Naruto. To paraphrase, "You seem tense and angry, any reason why?" The killer was silent, staring at Naruto without expression. What followed, however, was a chaotic silence that engulfed everyone in the store. Naruto, anticipating the killer's move, unsheathed his wakizashi and stabbed her in the stomach, making sure to avoid any vital organs. Jumping at the assassin as she staggered backward, Naruto slammed the blade's pommel into her temple, knocking her out. The patrons, both civilian and samurai, watched as Naruto slowly retracted his blade, their expressions tinged with fear. When Naruto saw everything had returned to normal, he let out a sigh and settled back into his seiza position. After only a minute, he calmly picked up the assassin's unfinished cup of tea and started sipping from it, smiling the whole time. He finished up, set the money down on the counter, and then snatched up the dead assassin on his way out. "I'm sorry about the clutter, but please accept the extras that I left on the table." "Many thanks, lad, and job well done." The owner called out from the kitchen. The office of Mifune. After receiving permission to enter, Naruto threw the dead assassin in front of his general as soon as he opened the door. "Mifune Dono, I stabbed a rat." "Ah, I see. And how convenient." Mifune frowned as he surveyed the corpse, then turned his attention back to Naruto. "Tomorrow morning, you and the other commanders will be tasked with leading a mission. My overanalysis has led to the destruction of 2 more civilian villages. Unfortunately, this mission will divert resources that could be used to defend the surrounding villages." Naruto's expression hardened as he realized the nature of this mission. "Hi Mifune Dono, but if the mission fails for some reason, what are our options?" To paraphrase, "I hope it doesn't come to that, but if it does, put that training to good use and find a way to come back in one piece." "And the villages that are wide open to attack now?" Mifune sighed sadly and said, "I know why you give me that harsh tone, Uzumaki-san. Believe me, it was not an easy decision to make. I hate to see more civilians die, but I cannot risk losing the advantage we need to win this war." Naruto sighed and nodded, "As you wish, General." "Uzumaki-san, before you're let go, I'd appreciate it if you could bring this rat, as you put it so eloquently, to the holding cells and have a doctor come check on it. I think she would be an asset to our team." Before leaving the office to complete his mission, Naruto bowed and took the dead killer's body. To Naruto's mind, however, tomorrow's raid would be counterproductive, and Takeshi would gain a significant advantage in the conflict as a result. Naruto hobbled around with his injured, no, completely useless right arm in his hands. The fact that Kurama wasn't curing his wounds like she usually did only added to his sense of foreboding about the severity of his condition. How long it had been since the operation was anyone's guess, including Naruto's. His only thoughts were with his fellow soldiers. Coughing up blood, Naruto asked, "How did it come to this? How did they know?" The snow turned a bright shade of red. "I'm praying that everybody's safe now." The Uzumaki grunted as he trudged through the snow, despite his severe injuries. But then Naruto heard voices off in the distance, and he cracked a grin despite the fact that his vision was beginning to blur. He fought to maintain his awareness long enough to reach the entrance to the civilian village. As a result of his injuries, Naruto fainted here. Chambers of the Council, in the final. The other commanders, minus Hiroto, were gathered in the chambers with Naruto and his master, Mifune, to plot their attack on the assassin guilds. Thankfully, the assassin that Naruto spared would be able to help them out. Mifune smiled as the assassin closed the door behind her and entered the room, saying, "Ah, there you are, Assassin-san. I see you still won't divulge your name. Let's get down to business then, shall we?" She sighed and held the bandage on her stomach while thinking, "Why did I agree to help you bastards again?" To which I replied, "Oh right, you would let me go right after saying that I would be forgiven." "Well," Fukui said with a grin. "That's all thanks to one of my students." Naruto shrugged and explained, she was simply following orders. She didn't want to take the mission, and I could tell by her demeanor in the interrogation room. Takuma sneered at Naruto, "She tried to kill you." As he shot the boy an angry look. "Do you not care about that, young commander?" "Yes, I am taking a chance, but I am confident in my abilities, and if I were to die as a result, it would be with honor, having gone out fighting." Hideki laughed and then said, "As funny as this is, maybe we should get to the point?" The general nodded, stood up, and headed over to the map of the Iron Country, where red circles indicated the locations of the various assassin guilds. Mifune removed and hid any other maps from the room because he didn't want the assassin to gain an unfair advantage over him. Furthermore, it would keep their other plans secret from Takeshi. There were 4 concentric circles on the map, each spaced between 4 and 10 miles apart and located close to forests and mountains. The assassin's thoughts were interrupted by Mifune's voice, but she was impressed by the map's detail and the reliability of the information it contained. Mifune glanced at the assassin and said, "As you can see, these red circles designate the 4 assassin guilds which we will be taking out. To paraphrase, now, Assassin-san, if you would kindly lead one of these commanders' platoons to the actual base, that would be most appreciated." The assassin bowed, but her mood had clearly changed. They were warned to be wary of her, and some of them started to wonder if they'd made a good decision. They ignored those ideas for the time being and carried on. Mifune continued in his businesslike tone, "Each of you will lead a platoon of 75 samurai to the locations I assign you. So, I told them, Fukui, you take the one that's closest to us. It's about 15 miles to the north. Hideki, you take the one that's 4 miles to the east of Fukui. Takuma, you take the farthest one. It's about 7 miles to the northeast of Fukui's location. Naruto, you take the one that's 5 miles to the west of Fukui." "Understood?" The commanders replied calmly, "Hi General Mifune." The samurai leader nodded, grinning, and said, "Good. Now, due to distance, all of you will be equipped with radios so that we can coordinate the raid where we can all attack at once." The elder paused and gave the assassin a look. "You, Assassin-san, must choose a side." Whoever it was nodded and pointed at Naruto. There was no verbal exchange, just a gesture. When Naruto nodded his head in agreement, the other commanders and Mifune cracked a grin. Dismissed with orders to assemble your team immediately following this debriefing. Mifune told Naruto to wait for him as everyone else left. When the door finally closed, they exchanged worried glances. It was like, "You felt it too, Uzumaki-san?" The assassin's mood changed, and now I'm wondering if we need to alter our strategy. "Hi Mifune Dono." General Smedley sighed and shook his head, saying, "You and I both know that isn't possible. It was either this, or let innocent civilians suffer as Takeshi continued to take villages that we could not cover." Naruto let out a long sigh because he realized Mifune was right. So, he patted the general on the shoulder, smiled sadly, and walked out of the room. The senior leader was left alone, and Naruto's act of kindness meant a lot to him. Mifune had a premonition that this raid would transform Naruto into a different person. Mifune sighed, tears rolling down his cheeks, and said, "War. A monstrosity which leaves scars on one's body, mind, and soul. Uzumaki-san, may the ancestors watch over you and lead you to success." Barracks. The assassin Naruto entered the barracks where the samurai were being held along with the other commanders. With the exception of Hiroto's team, who managed the field base, all of the guards who had been posted at villages were present. As soon as the samurai saw the commanders enter, they stood and bowed to them, then began preparing for the mission. The respect the samurai showed for their superiors was shocking to the killer. Even more remarkable was how they seemed to know what to do despite being given no direction by the commanders. She left as the samurai were preparing, and Naruto narrowed his eyes, his mind turning to the upcoming meeting in the chamber. The one who tried to kill Naruto was followed by him after he received a discreet nod from Fukui. The assassin smiled to herself as she readied her hidden radio to alert the guilds to an impending attack. Her heart and nerves were racing, but she had to calm down quickly because Naruto had suddenly appeared by the killer. The Uzumaki asked calmly, his hand on the hilt of Hanjo, ready to draw it at a moment's notice, "Something bothering you, Assassin-san?" The assassin responded calmly, looking at where Naruto had placed his hand. "Nah, I just find it funny that they take orders from a blonde bastard of a kid." Naruto paused and shook his head in amusement before continuing, "This blonde bastard, as Yusa put, has done much to show those twice my age what makes me worthy of the commander title. It's pretty amusing that people consider me a master of everything." The other commanders emerged from the barracks with the samurai in tow before the assassin could finish his sentence. The platoon leaders had signaled for order with a few simple hand gestures, and their troops had complied without hesitation. After determining the samurai force was prepared, Naruto and the others took turns explaining their objective. After the debriefing, more samurai emerged from the barracks, each carrying a tiny radio that fit discreetly in one ear. After everyone had double-checked their supplies, they took off running. On the way, however, they missed the assassin's stealthy motion that triggered the covert transmitter. The message was successfully sent. The arrival of enemy forces was imminent. Half an hour later. To paraphrase, Fukui in position, over. Naruto, take a seat. Copy. Hideki taking up position. Takuma taking up position. As everyone double-checked in, Harumasa nodded silently and started a countdown over the radio. Because at 0, the raid would begin. Each group was sizing up the other from a vantage point in the trees or atop a mountain ridge. As they traveled, they discussed the plan over the radio, and it was relatively straightforward. The first step is to use a key-enhanced strike to blow the door open. Second, invade quickly and eliminate all resistance. Third, once it is safe to do so, travel to the prearranged meeting place where injured people can be treated and a tally of the dead and missing can be taken. All of them would then return to the main village to report back to Mifune. It was a plan that appeared foolproof, but even the best-laid plans, no matter how basic, sometimes backfire. We'll be attacking in 3, 2, 1. Advance. As they ran, everyone's hands were on the hilt of their katana, and once they were within striking distance of the door, they began unsheathing their blades. The teams were almost there when the doors blew off their hinges, releasing a swarm of assassins. There was never a decoy base, and they discovered to their horror that there were many more assassins than they had anticipated. The samurai were outnumbered and fighting desperately to complete their mission. For Naruto, the scene was very different as Hideki and the others fought against the assassins who used poisons, stealth, and agility to incapacitate the samurai. As Naruto and the killer approached the entrance to the base, they smashed it in with a kick. The absence of enemies was the first thing Naruto noticed upon entering, but the gleam in the assassin's eyes was the second. The assassin, unable to form a coherent sentence, gestured for Naruto to use his Kyuubi cloak and save as many people as possible. The assassin's laughter could be heard just before the building exploded, sending shrapnel flying in all directions. Naruto couldn't get the assassin's laughter out of his head as his friends were being shredded by this and, in some cases, killed. A constant reminder of the failure that cost Naruto his friends' lives. The assassins charged at Naruto and his comrades like a pack of ravenous wolves, interrupting their thoughts with a war cry from the nearby tree line. It was at this point that Naruto resolved, "No, not again, never again. I will not let any more of these fine men and women perish this day." When Naruto turned off his invisibility cloak, he let out a rousing battle cry that was quickly followed by the rest of the army. Soon, the only sounds audible for miles were the clang of shuriken being deflected, the piercing of flesh by a sword, and the screams of the wounded and dying. The laughter returned when the injured and dying began to scream, but Naruto shook it off and pushed the memory deep into his subconscious. Returning to the fray just in time, Naruto dove to avoid a shuriken to the head and rolled out of the way of a dagger slash. Naruto rolled out of the way, then spun on his toes to ram Hanjo into the face of the poor sod who tried to kill him. The heart was pierced by the blade, and he died instantly, but his eyes widened as he sensed something wasn't quite right. After killing the assassin, he heard one unmistakable word that confirmed his worst fears. Boom. Instantly blinded and with burst eardrums, Naruto nonetheless knew he was in the air because of the lack of pressure on his body. Naruto's cries of agony echoed even more loudly in that somewhere, which turned out to be the nearby forest. Why is that? With all his strength, Naruto slammed his right shoulder first into a tree. Despite his inability to hear the crack, Naruto knew his right shoulder was broken when he suddenly lost feeling in his entire arm. The explosion had destroyed most of his armor, some of which was buried deep into his second-degree burns, so this was not the full extent of his injuries. Kurama said anxiously, "Hold on Kit, I'm doing as much as I can." Because he was truly worried about the state his container was in. The answer is, "I know, and thank you Kurama." To avoid aggravating his shoulder injury and draw Kurama's attention away from his internal wounds, he grabbed Hanjo with his left hand and propped himself up on it. When he saw the battlefield ahead of him, however, he wished he had been killed instantly when he collided with the tree. Amidst the confusion of several explosions, Naruto's allies lay dying. It was here that Naruto had an epiphany. They seem to be mostly clones, and they keep blowing up. Damn it, this is bad. Naruto, now disguised in his Kyuubi cloak, jumped back into the fray and immediately began using his heightened sensitivity to emotions to identify the real enemies, before giving orders to his troops to eliminate them. When it became clear that Naruto's right arm was useless, he conjured chakra arms and began grabbing, throwing, and crushing anyone in his path to use the rest of the remaining forces. One that had attempted to sneak up behind him was quickly ensnared in one of these arms and crushed to the point of explosion. Right after that, Naruto swung his wakizashi to the right and blocked several shuriken, one of which grazed his left cheek. Unfortunately, Naruto noticed that Kurama's chakra was rapidly dwindling, and the wound had begun to bubble and wasn't healing as it should have. Hey, look how well that poison from Takeshi we got to use on that beast's chakra is working. How do they know what I hold? That should be impossible. Unless there's a spy that is relaying all of this information. Great, he scowled at the three assassins before him. The assassins laughed as they rushed the disabled Jinchuriki, planning to kill him despite Naruto's best efforts to prevent it. The paralyzing effects of the poison quickly set in as it entered his system. Naruto felt his muscles and joints begin to freeze and knew that any effort would only hasten the disease's spread, but he had no choice as his three attackers stood directly over him. He yelled, channeled a burst of chakra, and pushed the three back before vanishing. Naruto swung around behind the trio and slashed two of them across the back of the feet, severing the Achilles tendons. As they collapsed in agony, the lone survivor suddenly backflipped to avoid Naruto's katana lunge, and then he retaliated with a flurry of shuriken. The poison was beginning to take its toll, despite Naruto's best efforts to avoid the arrows. The Kyuubi cloak began to sway just as Naruto prepared to launch another attack, and it eventually went out entirely. He had to put an end to this immediately or risk freezing to death out here. Naruto mustered what strength he had left, augmented his feet with ki, and charged at the three targets, giving priority to the two who attempted to stand despite having their Achilles tendons severed. The one who had not yet been seriously hurt watched in horror as a blur decapitated his two companions, only to gasp in pain and look down to see Hanjo stab him in the chest. The assassin laughed, and then began coughing up blood, before saying, "Your friends will die today, and so will you. The elemental nations will be brought to their knees as a new era washes over the land of iron." Naruto snarled and violently ripped the katana out of the man's stomach, then he severed his head because he couldn't stand to listen to any more of his nonsense. He flicked the blood off, sheathed the blade, and turned back to his men with wide, horrified eyes. A graveyard surrounded the ruins of the Assassin's Guild. All of Naruto's men and the assassins who ambushed them were dead on the ground. He was the last surviving person. A sudden wave of pain overcame Naruto before he could ponder this, and he collapsed to the snowy ground below. With Kurama's healing efforts undone, Naruto collapsed to his knees and began coughing up and vomiting up large amounts of blood. He was aware of the pressing need to reach a nearby village. Through Hideki. Assassins rushed in as some of Hideki's forces blew the door open, but instead of attacking, they all went boom. Those who rushed the door were killed instantly, and those who followed behind were injured. As more killers sprinted towards them, this time aiming for anything in their way, Hideki had a sudden epiphany. The samurai commander ducked and beheaded the assassin who tried to kill him, saying, "We were set up." Perhaps Naruto should have killed that assassin when he had the chance. The author states, however, it is through no fault of his own, as he is but a young lad who has experienced war for the first time. After eliminating another hitman, Hideki noticed that his group was successfully forcing their foe back into their house. Hideki ordered his troops to advance because he knew it would be advantageous to trap the assassins in a small area from which they could be tracked. Though it took some time for the tide to turn, the samurai were now fighting inside the Assassin's Guild. There were casualties on both sides, but the assassins simply couldn't compete with the key attacks and team tactics that the other side was using. Hideki smiled as he killed an assassin in front of him and then kicked another who had come at him from behind with his ki. The killer was slammed so hard into the back wall that his head was embedded and blood was dripping from his mouth. But before the commander could celebrate, 4 more assassins rushed at him, daggers out. Hideki laughed off the attempt on his life and drew his katana, slashing at his attackers. The 4 attackers froze as he turned to help his platoon, and then they were cut into bloody pieces. One of the assassins, seeing the destruction before him, attempted to escape to another part of the base by sneaking, but one of the samurai spotted him and pursued. The samurai caught up to the enemy quickly, but she noticed something she didn't like and returned to Hideki. "Hideki-sama. One is trying something with a seal, and I fear for the worst. Orders, sir? After dispatching an assassin who had the audacity to try to attack him, Hideki said, "Why the hell do I have to tell you the orders? If you think it poses a threat, tell the others to leave immediately." The samurai nodded and shouted, "At once, sir." At the top of his lungs. As in, retreat. Fall back, I repeat. Retreat. The samurai and Hideki didn't waste any time retreating after the battle was over. The samurai's predictions came true as the building erupted in a violent explosion just as most of Hideki's forces had evacuated the base. Most people were able to escape the area of the blast in time, but a few were not so fortunate and were killed or seriously injured. Hideki wanted to be able to smile because of the success of this mission, but the fact that only half of his platoon was still alive spoke volumes. Only 20 people out of the original 75 survived. Through Takuma. While most of Takuma's forces survived the battle, it was very similar to Hideki's. Only 30 of the 75 samurai had been killed, but the surviving ones were all badly hurt. The base did not explode like the others, but the battle against Jiro and his henchmen left most of the defenders in a sorry state. Before Jiro's right-hand man sank his katana through Takuma's skull, the commander had already dispatched 10 of the bastard's troops. The other leader, Jiro, easily dispatched 20 samurai, and then engaged in a massive battle with Takuma, leaving the commander in the condition he was in now. It was a brutal fight, with Jiro seemingly responding to everything that Takuma threw at him. Despite taking poison during the fight, the commander landed a few blows with his katana, severing certain tendons in the assassin's body. One of the affected areas was the hands, and it was these areas that ultimately led to Takuma's victory through decapitation. He sighed and smiled sadly as he reflected on the near-total failure of the raid. And despite his desire to hold Naruto accountable for his decision to spare the assassin's life, he found himself unable to hold the boy responsible. As he told his troops to rest up before heading to the agreed-upon rendezvous point, Takuma reasoned, "We all make mistakes, it is only human nature to do so." Naruto is but a child who is experiencing war for the first time, a war which will mature him in more ways than one. Fukui included. The Harumasa sidestepped a dagger thrust, grabbed the offending limb, and threw the killer to the ground. When the enemy fell to the frozen ground, a katana was immediately driven into the back of their head. The veteran samurai paused for a moment to catch his breath and survey his surroundings after the battle. 20 dead enemies lie at his feet, and his own troops are dispersed and dead all over the battlefield. Fukui, like the others, was aware of the situation and didn't hold it against Naruto that he chose to protect the killer. The battle, like Naruto's, was a complete massacre because nothing went according to plan. A massive stream of fire poured out after the door was blown open, engulfing both the samurai and the assassins who had rushed to the front lines. After the fire was put out, a group of followers and assassins loyal to Takeshi emerged from the base and immediately opened fire. Naruto's training made short work of Takeshi's shinobi, samurai hybrids, but Fukui's platoon took the most damage from the assassins, who represented an entirely new threat. The assassins would use the hybrids as a diversion before striking, slitting the samurai's throats coldly. Fukui winced at the thought, but when he looked around and saw 30 assassins and hybrids closing in on him, he had no choice but to raise his katana in the defensive position. Fukui waited for the enemy to attack, but instead they formed a circle and allowed one person inside. Fukui shouted angrily, "Takeshi!" at the man who had suddenly materialized in front of him. He smiled and said, "Hello, brother. It's great to see you, but things could be better under the current circumstances." "Come to finish the job, Takeshi, is that what you're after?" Fukui asked, his voice level and tinged with hate. Takeshi pretended to be hurt and said, "Oh, you wound me. How embarrassing that you didn't even address me as brother." After a short pause, Fukui said with a sad tone, "After what you made me do. You are no such thing in my eyes. Where did the brother I once knew, Takeshi, go?" Without pausing for thought, the person answered, "He died in the fire that destroyed our parents' house." They then turned and left the circle, oblivious to the tears welling up in Fukui's eyes. Takeshi signaled with his hands as he left, and a strange plant-like creature materialized in front of Fukui. It released a cloud of spores that knocked the commander out. Then it bound him in ropes to keep him from moving during the trip. Naruto included. Naruto hobbled around with his injured, no, completely useless right arm in his hands. The fact that Kurama wasn't curing his wounds like she usually did only added to his sense of foreboding about the severity of his condition. How long it had been since the operation was anyone's guess, including Naruto's. His only thoughts were with his fellow soldiers. Coughing up blood, Naruto asked, "How did it come to this? How did they know?" The snow turned a bright shade of red. "I'm praying that everybody's safe now." The Uzumaki grunted as he trudged through the snow, despite his severe injuries. But then Naruto heard voices off in the distance, and he cracked a grin despite the fact that his vision was beginning to blur. He fought to maintain his awareness long enough to reach the entrance to the civilian village. As a result of his injuries, Naruto fainted here. As Naruto opened his eyes, he was greeted by the sight of white walls and the nauseating smell of antiseptic. Finally able to open his eyes, Naruto took in his surroundings and noticed that he was lying in a bed surrounded by a variety of medical devices. "Hospital, please thank Kami." Kurama exclaimed with relief, "Finally, I can hear your voice again, Kit." "Is everything okay?" I genuinely don't know who Kurama is. The fox certainly heard the extreme sadness in Naruto's voice. But just as the Biju was about to speak, the door to the room opened, and a nurse walked in. The nurse expressed surprise at the patient's early rise and turned to head for the exit, saying, "Oh dear, I didn't expect you to be up so soon." To paraphrase, "Stay right here, I will get the doctor." Naruto muttered to himself, "Where can I go? I'm stuck in a hospital bed for Kami's sake." The doctor entered the room and chuckled at this. The doctor was an elderly man, about Fukui's height, who was dressed in the standard medical attire and was holding a clipboard and a pen. He had a tan complexion, gray, thinning hair, and deep wrinkles on his face. "Doctor. It's been almost 3 days since we found you passed out at the entrance, Samurai-san." Naruto's eyes widened as he realized that his swords weren't with him. In a grandfatherly voice, he reassured Naruto, "Fear not for your swords, Samurai-san. I have taken care to have them sharpened and polished at a nearby blacksmith. My name is Guro, and before we get into your long list of injuries, let me introduce myself." When Naruto sensed Goro's unchanging feelings, the latter said, "Naruto Uzumaki, I thank you for healing me in my time of need." Upon seeing you, Guro said, "You were a sight for sore eyes when you came in, lad." He then looked down at his clipboard and began to make a list. Guro looked up from his clipboard, a smile now on his face. A broken shoulder blade, multiple puncture wounds, 2 slipped vertebrae, a cracked collarbone, massive internal bleeding, and a major concussion. Oh, and the poison was also a real kicker too. Once that was out, you started glowing red. It's great to have you here, Akuma no Senshi. Nice to see I have a fan, Naruto said with a chuckle and a groan because his stomach still hurt, but if it is alright, I must get back to Mifune Dono and inform him of my whereabouts. Guro grimaced and shook his head. Unfortunately, Naruto-san, your injuries are too severe for you to return to work for at least 2 weeks, though we can have word sent to Mifune-sama. Naruto heaved a sigh and covered his face with his hands. To which he replied, "Fine, but do you mind if I write the message? What I have to say is confidential, samurai business I'm afraid." Guro smiled and patted Naruto on the shoulder, indicating that he understood the situation and that he would have a nurse bring the necessary supplies. As he was about to leave, he suddenly recalled something and said to himself, "Now you must rest as I will not permit you to leave for another day." "Good morning, Naruto-san. I almost forgot, I'll have someone take you to the blacksmith to pick up your swords and a special gift when you're released from the hospital." A nurse arrived shortly after the doctor left carrying stationery. 10 minutes later, Naruto had written a lengthy message outlining his intentions and the consequences he hoped to see from his actions. When the message was finished, he had a nurse go get the most reliable villager, a young man roughly Naruto's age. The boy gladly complied with the instructions to deliver the message to Mifune via hawk after being given it under the strict condition that it be kept secret. The next day, after Guro told him to, Naruto got out of bed, did some light stretching, and changed into the clothes he wore during his first training session with Fukui. After being released, Naruto was taken to the town blacksmith, where he was introduced to the ripped man he'd ever seen. The blacksmith, holding Hanjo by its scabbard, proclaimed, "A lucky samurai you are to have the lost Masamune." To paraphrase, I can see why it picked you. Naruto nodded and smiled as he accepted Hanjo and his wakizashi, tucking them into his silk sash. Soon after, Naruto retrieved his katana and wakizashi and tucked them back into their silk sash, saying, "Thanks, it has served me well." You said you had a surprise for me, Dr. Guro. The blacksmith acknowledged him and pointed toward the store's rear. When Naruto walked into the store's back room, he was shocked to see what was displayed on the armor stand. The armor was the same dark reddish-orange as his previous set, with black highlights to make it look like flames. There were no decals on the front of the chest plate, but the kanji for Akuma no Senshi surrounded a picture of the Kyuubi in all his glory, his mouth open in a roar. Naruto glared at the blacksmith. How did you know I contain the 9 tails? This part of him was supposed to be a secret known only to a select few. The blacksmith held up his hands in a defeated gesture and said, "Whoa now, Naruto-san. This was all found out after Guro and the nurses found you 3 days ago. Since only one of the chakra sources was colored red on the scans, and given the rumors they had heard, I'm sure you can figure out what the other one was." Naruto nodded. "I apologize for my outburst, blacksmith-san." He could tell there was no deceit in his words. The blacksmith grinned and gestured to the armor, saying, "I understand how samurai work, there is no need for apologies. The armor is yours to use at no cost, so go ahead." When the blacksmith's hand stopped Naruto from reaching into his bag, he said, "Nonsense, I will pay you full price. Please accept this as a small token of our appreciation to Naruto-san for protecting our home." After a moment of reflection, Naruto greeted the blacksmith with a smile and a handshake. "This will stay with me forever. What was your name?" The blacksmith bowed. "Ah, silly me, I never introduced myself." Saying, "Taichi at your service, Naruto-san." When Naruto was finished putting on the armor and strapping his swords to his right side, he whistled in approval. It's the ideal form of Taichi, not too tight and not too loose. To which he replied, "Thank you Naruto-san, is there anything else I can help you with?" "A hotel sounds like a good idea." The blacksmith nodded and said cheerfully, "It's just across the street from me." "Good day, Naruto-san. Thank you for the beautiful armor and for looking after my swords." Naruto is doing fine. Anytime. Despite Naruto's protests, once they arrived at the inn, they gave him a room by himself, free of charge. He felt terrible about accepting tips and hoped to make amends with these people one day. When he returned to his room, he reached for the bag Dr. Guro had given him, which contained Tsunade's necklace and the one he had discovered in the destroyed church. Naruto sighed, hung them around his neck, and walked out of the inn in search of a watering hole. In other words, he was parched. "Kit, why are you so down today?" Naruto frowned and stared at the ground as he walked, but he said to Kurama, "You should know why, Kurama, you can view my memories after all. Let me wallow in my own guilt for a while. Please don't make me talk about what I did." Kurama didn't approve of Naruto's behavior, but he said, "Fine Kit, but you should know better. In other words, what would your master say if he saw you like this? If he's dead, it's probably my fault, so let's stop bringing it up, Kurama." Weather in the mindscape had deteriorated, and the fox whimpered pitifully, hoping that Naruto would soon feel better. The sky had gone from bright and sunny to overcast and chilly. The weather was a perfect metaphor for Naruto's gloomy mood. The bartender noticed Naruto's despondent mood as soon as he sat down at the counter after looking around the bar. Naruto looked up into the bartender's understanding eyes as he was served a bottle of sake. To paraphrase, "Here kid, I usually don't serve minors, but I can tell you have seen some shit you wish to forget about." To the bartender's satisfaction, Naruto paid in full and then some. "Please accept this as gratuity. Today's tip jar is full." The bartender took the money with a chuckle, but before he could grab a sake dish for the new customer, he discovered Naruto chugging straight from the bottle. The bartender shrugged and decided it was best to get out of Naruto's way, so he began cleaning the bar. The adult said, "Damn kid, what did you see to make you like this?" When Naruto turned to his left, he saw an old man with white hair who was smoking a cigarette. Naruto replied morosely, "I'd rather not talk about it, plus, if you look at the back of my armor I am sure you can figure out who I am." After finally looking, the old man laughed, "Well, so that is what all the hoopla's been about for the past 3 days." He paused to blow the smoke out of his mouth. "Have a cigarette on me, I don't mind, kid. And don't try to tell me that you're only 12 or 13 years old. That's a load of hogwash. For Kami's sake, you're a samurai. Your death by blade is inevitable. Hey, I've grown fond of you old-timer. Okay, I'll take one." After the elder placed the cancer stick in Naruto's mouth and lit it for him, Naruto took a drag and coughed as he choked on the smoke, prompting a small chuckle from the older man. "My first time was like a dream. Exactly how does it taste?" "It's a little dry, but it has a hint of cherries, Naruto puffed after holding the smoke in his mouth for a moment. This is not bad, old man. This is not bad. Take them, kid, I've got plenty back at the house, he said, setting a handful down next to the bottle of sake. Just know that whatever it is that's bothering you, you shouldn't let it bring you down. Remember that you're just a kid who's bound to make some mistakes. With a sigh that recalled his master's criticism, Naruto exhaled the smoke. Do you think this could cause cancer in me? The Uzumaki reflected on this as he inhaled deeply from his cigarette. I have you, you numbskull. A woman in the back of the bar who had been watching Naruto for some time became enraged when she saw one of the necklaces he was wearing and promptly stood up and marched up to the samurai, causing the other customers to fear for their safety. Kurama smiled at this. Let me know how you came into possession of that necklace, you crazy samurai. When Naruto finally turned to look at the attacker, he was taken aback by her stunning beauty. She was a pretty girl with green eyes, a fair complexion, and black hair that was cut in the Heim style, with short bangs and chin-length strands framing her face and the rest tied in a high ponytail. Her uniform was gray, and she wore a shoulder guard on her right shoulder, gray gloves, and a shirt with a cutout that showed off her ample bust. Can I assist you, my lovely lady? Naruto chuckled and joined in. The woman's face flushed slightly at the honorific, but she quickly regained composure once she recalled her mission. Give me the backstory on that broken necklace of yours. What is this? Naruto took it and held it up for her to see, saying, I found this in a church that was burned by Takeshi's men, sadly nobody survived. Tears were suddenly streaming down the woman's face, and a soft hand wiped them away. When she finally opened her eyes, she stared at Naruto in awe. I hate to see a pretty girl like you in tears, so come and have a seat with me. The woman slowly reached out and clasped Naruto's necklace onto her own. She sighed, dropped Naruto's half glass, and gestured for the bartender to bring out some sake. As the bottle of sake was placed in front of her, she began, that necklace was my mother's, you know. Because of the laws in the elemental nations, we were forced to leave our hometown, but we did so at different times so as not to raise suspicion. To make a long story short, I spent years traveling throughout the elemental nations looking for her until I got a tip she was in Iron Country. A moment later, she paused to take a swig of sake, savoring the sting as it went down. After arriving in Iron Country, I met a man named Takeshi who promised to lead me to my mother if I helped him with a task. However, after spending a year or so learning from him, I decided to leave when I learned his vision for the country. It would be like my home village all over again. Naruto sighed at the story, putting out his cancer stick. You and I are after a common enemy, it seems. After months of fighting against him, I'm worried that our efforts will have been in vain due to an error I made on a recent mission. Do you wish to talk about it? The woman asked Naruto with a sad expression on her face. Sighing, Naruto said, most of it is classified, and I'd rather not. The memory is too painful. And so is learning about the death of my mother. She cut in angrily. Naruto looked at the girl who held out her right hand and said, I told you my tale, and now it is time for you to tell me yours. By the way, I'm Shizuka. After introducing himself as Naruto, he extended his hand and said, and it's a pleasure to meet you. After a few moments of staring into their respective sake bottles, the silence grew uncomfortable, and Naruto sighed, took out a pack of cigarettes, opened it, and inserted a cigarette into his mouth. Naruto thanked the bartender for the pack of matches he received. Naruto lit it up, took a long drag, and then looked at Shizuka without breaking his expression. It all started when I was 6 years old and sitting on the swing set thinking about life after finishing the academy, worried. Mifune's entire state of mind could be summed up in that one word as he paced his office, waiting for good news. The Iron Country leader waited for 2 days, 2 very long days, without hearing from any commander. Mifune sighed and prepared to sit back at his desk and order the organization of a search party. But just as he was about to take a seat, one of the gate guards rushed into his office, bringing with him a mixture of fear and relief. The guard took a deep breath before delivering the bad news, Mifune-sama. Hideki and Takuma have been seen in the distance, but they are badly injured, Mifune-sama. Also, they only brought 65 samurai back with them. Orders, General? Mifune sighed and closed his eyes as he said, Naruto is missing and so is my student, and to think that many were killed as a result. The worst that I feared has happened. The gate guards concerned, Mifune-sama? Roused the old man from his stupor. Dismissed. Get medics ready, and send a team to bring them in safely, the announcer said. When told to leave the office, the gate guard bowed and complied without even closing the door. With his eyes open, Mifune felt a conflicted urge to lean back in his chair and stare at the ceiling. His mind was blank. According to the guard, the mission was a complete failure, giving Takeshi a strategic advantage in the war. There have been too many casualties to continue shielding the defenseless. Drastic action may be required. Mifune rubbed his temples and took a quick look around the office before getting to his feet and strolling over to the nearby window. Medics and samurai of all stripes hurried about, loading patients onto stretchers, administering first aid at the gate, and saying prayers for those who wouldn't make it to tomorrow. Considering the extent of their wounds, it is a tribute to their training and determination that they managed to survive for 2 days in the harsh conditions of Iron Country. Mifune turned around to see Hideki and Takuma hobble into the house, shut the door, and collapse exhausted onto a couch. Even though his 2 commanders were badly hurt, the samurai leader said calmly, "You both should seek medical treatment, your report can wait until later." Despite their general's stern demeanor, the 2 commanders gave their reports with little hesitation and a simple nod of the head. After 30 minutes, both commanders were clearly near collapse from blood loss, but their reports were still transmitted. Mifune was dismayed by the report because he realized that without a miracle, the war would be lost. Far more people than Mifune would have liked to see dead, both civilians and samurai, have perished. The samurai chief, however, was well aware that such is the price of war. Mifune leaned forward, his gaze hard and businesslike, and said, "Uzumaki-san and I figured the assassin was up to something, but I didn't think it would be this. The truth is, with you 2 out of commission, we are down 2 commanders, 1 missing in action and 1 presumed dead. That leaves Hiroto, but we need him at the field base and cannot call him back." After coughing into his right hand, Takuma was alarmed to discover blood on his palm. "Uzumaki-san was our best hope of turning the tide of this war, and his mistake has cost us dearly." Some internal injuries. Not surprising. Anyway, I sadly have to agree with you, Mifune Dono. The general glared at Takuma disapprovingly and asked, "And do you blame him? A boy which has not yet reached the age of maturity." Takuma and Hideki both exclaimed, "No, Mifune-sama." With Hideki continuing, "You're right, he is but a kid, and a human at that. We all make mistakes, but it seems like this one has cost him." Something pecked at the window, cutting off the conversation. Mifune and the other commanders turned to see what was tied to the hawk's leg and immediately felt uneasy. Because they understood that this was an ultimatum issued by Takeshi or one of the missing commanders. Without pausing for thought, Mifune got to his feet, opened the window, and removed the message from the hawk's leg. Everyone in the office fell silent as Mifune carefully opened the envelope and read the contents out loud. "My entire platoon has been killed. There were no survivors, and now I am the only one left alive. When I woke up, I was in a hospital, where my injuries were being treated. Unfortunately, I was given a 2-week leave of absence because of the severity of my wounds. For the sorrow I have brought upon the entire Iron Country and upon myself, I hereby resign from my position. Until next we meet. Masamune out. I will stay where I am at, but as to where, that will remain secret in case the enemy happens to find this message. I will update you, though, if I can, and I advise we meet in a week. You will know where." Hideki's tone was somber and distant as he said, "Damn kid took it hard, hell, he probably thinks Fukui-san has perished due to his mistakes." Takuma coughed again, this time spitting out blood, and wiped his lips. "I fear Uzumaki-san will do what many have done in this situation unless he finds his path again." With conflicting feelings, Mifune reread the message and pounded his fists on his desk. Mifune sighed deeply, he will need someone to help him find the path again, Takuma, Hideki. Naruto's sorrow is deep, and he's likely burying his mistake deep within. The general leaned back in his chair and gestured toward the door, saying, "When I meet him in a week, I will inform him of my decision on his self-demotion. I need you to get to the hospital right away. I have a lot to think about." The officers bowed and departed, leaving their distraught leader alone in the office. Fukui included. The Harumasa moaned as he woke up, and it was a while before his eyes became accustomed to the darkness. As his eyes adjusted, Fukui saw bars ahead of him, which made him sigh and bring back painful memories of the Second World War. As he emerged from the shadows, Takeshi said softly, "Brings back memories, doesn't it, brother?" Fukui stood up and sighed, "Hi, bad memories." "Takeshi, You made a huge mistake by letting me wander around in here alone. The rebel leader shrugged and said, I could care less, you won't be alive for much longer anyhow. One of your major flaws, Takeshi, was carelessness with details. The offended party scoffed and changed the subject. It's ironic that I told you about the death of our parents in a cell just like this one. Fukui approached the fence and put his arms through the openings. His expression of sadness was noticeable even though he maintained composure. I wonder, Fukui paused with a smirk, do you still have those scars when you watched Mother die from the burning debris you were under? My father died with honor, by the blade, and my mother was sadly butchered in front of you. Fukui's smirk broadened into a smile as Takeshi growled and slammed the cell's iron bars. Even though I've lost my friends, my wife, and everything I've ever cared about, I haven't gone off the warrior's path. Brother. Maybe there's still a little bit of the old you in there, somewhere. The rebel leader stared down Fukui with a fiery glare. When a wandering shinobi came to my rescue, and I had to bury my own parents, that shred was lost to the abyss. After that, the brother stormed out, never to return to Fukui again. The commander paced his cell, worried about Naruto's health and survival. A wise teacher once told me, be strong, my student, and don't stray off the path. Here and now, Naruto. While telling Shizuka about his life, Naruto smoked 3 cigarettes and drank an entire bottle of sake. He was fortunate in that Kurama would not let his container become intoxicated or develop cancer. Shizuka was intrigued by the tale and began to make parallels as she listened. The most significant, however, was that they both had to overcome emotional pain to get to where they are now. This brief encounter would prove to be the beginning of a lifelong friendship. The next hour was spent idly chatting, but eventually it was time to leave because the bar was closing. But as they stood up, Naruto removed the necklace that Shizuka's mom had been wearing and gave it to her. I know how much this means to you, Shizuka, so please accept it. As her shock subsided, so did her sad smile. You deserve it more than I do because you buried her and had to deal with the trauma of what you witnessed that night. Naruto began to say something, but a finger was placed on his mouth. Shizuka re-hung the necklace around Naruto's neck and said, no buts. Take it with the thought that you might see me again. I appreciate your time, Naruto-san, and hope you enjoy the rest of the day, evening. As Shizuka left the bar, the bartender laughed quietly to himself and continued wiping down the counter. In the words of a wise samurai, she's a real keeper, you know. Not many samurai give their life story that easily, perhaps she would be a good choice to keep you on that path. A snort of laughter escaped Naruto's lips as he replied, you sound just like my master. The bartender mumbled the last part, but Naruto understood it, as a former samurai, I would know. Damn back injury in the Second War. The Uzumaki smiled as he left his payment at the counter and got up to leave. Naruto smiled as he placed his money on the counter and prepared to leave, thinking, perhaps I've been too hard on myself. Perhaps this is what it meant when Master said, you won't know my words until after I'm gone. Meanwhile, in Kurama's mental landscape, the sun was slowly pushing aside the dark clouds. The fox understood that his container's sadness could not be alleviated by merely meeting a pretty woman by chance. There was something in the depths of Naruto's mind that took great pleasure in his melancholy. Let the sadness and anger you feel over your error wash over you, Yami said with a maniacal chuckle. Yami laughed amusedly again, then took a deep breath and said, it will only make me stronger and in the end, when the time is right. Oh yes. As the saying goes, there will be blood. After meeting Shizuka, Naruto's emotions outside the mindscape left him bewildered. It wasn't the usual nervousness, but rather a sense of something clicking into place. After giving it some thought, Naruto went to the hospital to check on Guro. As he pondered the possibility of creating a remedy for the poison he'd just been exposed to. After registering with the front desk, he waited patiently for Guro while meditating in the waiting area. The onlookers wondered how the participants could keep their cool and remain motionless for so long, especially in light of the fact that they were wearing heavy armor. The thought of a civilian child running towards him after jumping off her mother's lap caused an internal chuckle from Naruto, but he quickly stifled it. Everyone became anxious because they knew a samurai was keeping watch, but what happened next took everyone by surprise. The curious youngster asked, Mr. Samurai, why do you look so sad? While continuing his meditation, Naruto said softly to the child, sit child, I mean you no harm. With a pat on the floor to the right. The kid eagerly complied, tried out the Seiza position, and laughed at her own failure. Instead, she settled into a natural sitting position, her megawatt smile unabashedly intact. her childlike innocence bringing back memories of Naruto's own. If you choose the path of the warrior, your ability to understand and share my feelings at such a young age will make you a formidable samurai. The young girl poked curiously at Hanjo's sheath and replied, but Mama says samurai are dangerous. Imitating shock, Naruto let out a fake gasp. Did she know? The kid seemed to agree, nodding his or her head. Is the fact that you use your pointy things to drive away bad men the reason you're in such a gloomy mood? Naruto looked up from his meditative state and laughed, then glanced at the child's sweaty mother. His focus returned to the girl next to him after a brief pause. I'm sorry that a choice I made led to the deaths of the people I swore to protect, and while your mother is right that we samurai are dangerous, that's only because we take that risk to keep you and the rest of Iron Country safe. When asked by the child, does Mr. Samurai need a hug to make the boo-boo in his heart all better? The little one frowned. Naruto gave the girl a wistful smile as he ruffled her long blonde hair. Before he could respond, the girl swept him up in an embrace that momentarily silenced Naruto. He sighed, got to his feet, and, bride style, carried the baby over to her mom. As she took her daughter from the samurai, the mother said, "Thank you Samurai-san, and I apologize for my daughter's behavior." Naruto smiled at the civilian, who returned his greeting with a smile, and then said, "No apology is needed ma'am, just don't discourage the gift she has. Lead her in the right direction to protect the purity of her youth until she reaches the decision that lies deep within her heart." With a nod of approval, the mother asked, "Do you ever regret following the samurai way?" Saddened by the approaching doctor, Naruto answered, "I have been down many paths, some good, some bad, but if not for my master I would have killed myself long ago. Please excuse me, Dr. Guro has arrived." The mother and the bystanders, who overheard the entire conversation between Naruto and the doctor, would never look at samurai the same way again after witnessing what happened. With a shrug, Naruto responded to Goro's remark, "That was some speech, kid." The man asked, "So, I take it you're here for that poison we got out of ya?" Naruto smirked and said, "You know your patients well, Guro-san. If it's okay with you, I'd like to meet Mifune Dono in 6 days." Knowing that Naruto wouldn't take no for an answer, the doctor sighed and said, "Fine, but no fighting or strenuous activities. You may have that magical beast of healing in your gut, but that does not heal all the wounds." "Does it? It's been said, the mind is a fickle thing, is it not?" With a light chuckle, Guro smacked Naruto in the back. "That's the case, Akuma knows Senshi. No doubt about it. As of now, day 6. It was early in the morning, and the sun was just beginning to rise over the distant mountains. While doing his morning stretches at the inn, Naruto thought back on the antidote he and Guro had created. They were largely taking a chance on it, but they were hoping for the best. The poison that left the scar on Naruto's cheek was replicated in the hospital labs, and he was injected with it all night long. Guro and the nurses then used diagnostic jutsu to determine how the Kyuubi responded to the poison and whether or not the Biju were able to avoid it. Disappointingly, the first 3 tests failed, and it appeared that only 5 antidotes could be developed. The 4th one also bombed, but the 5th and final one was at least partially successful. Before leaving the hospital, Naruto made sure to pack the antidote away in a vial with his other essentials. After finishing his stretches, Naruto examined his armor for dents, scratches, and other damage, as well as areas that needed polishing or repair. Naruto noticed a scratch and reached for his bag, where his Polish was, but was interrupted by the sound of the doorbell. Naruto's senses heightened and he was able to make out the signature. It was one he was familiar with, and it brought a smile to his face. To which Naruto yelled, "One moment, please," before putting away his polish and opening the door to the visitor. "What brings you here today, Shizuka?" Inquiringly, "Word got around town that you're leaving," she said. "Could I possibly tag along?" With a raised eyebrow, Naruto said, "Perhaps." However, the question was why. Shizuka was embarrassed by the name calling and huffed as she tried to collect her thoughts. In his words, "I enjoyed your company last night, okay. I just can't help but feel there might be something between us." As he pondered, Naruto hummed and shrugged his shoulders. To which she replied, "Well, I suppose, but you will have to do any fighting if we encounter enemies." "I cannot fight, Doctor's orders." She said, "Yes." And then blinked in surprise before giggling nervously. "Ha ha ha, I'm off to gather my belongings. Bye." After Shizuka had left the room, Naruto closed the door and looked back at the scene with a snort of amusement. "Women are a never-ending mystery," someone once said. Kurama began his explanation with a drawn-out "so," followed by a wry grin. "I'm dying to know, when can I start expecting grand kits?" Kurama. Having acquired a map from Taichi, the blacksmith, Naruto was now well equipped to locate the site where his platoon had been slaughtered and where he had come dangerously close to death. Even though it wasn't what he wanted to do, Naruto knew he had to go back there to finally put things to rest. To say the least, Naruto and Shizuka's silence and sidelong glances made the walk there uncomfortable. It was in the direction of the cleavage, which Naruto knew was inappropriate. While training in the mountains, he began to deeply regret reading the Icha Icha book Jiraiya had given him. To some extent, then, it is true that Naruto was a sexual deviant. Shizuka, aware of the roving eyes, chuckled to herself, pushed her breasts together, and walked in such a way that her butt swayed provocatively. Definitely a clumsy gait. They arrived at the scene of the disaster after a journey of about an hour, but the blizzard had obscured what was left of the building and the numerous bodies that had been scattered about. As Naruto took in his surroundings, he couldn't help but tremble as memories of what had happened flashed through his head. Shizuka asked nervously, "Naruto, you going to be all right?" "Hi, just. Let me do what I need to do," he replied hesitantly. Naruto, who had already located each body, took a few steps forward before bending over to brush the snow off the ground. Two black eyes stared back at him from the pale face of one of the fellow soldiers he had abandoned. When the cries of the dead echoed in his mind, Naruto's entire body shook and he fell to his knees. He finally broke down and let it all out. Shizuka yelled, "Naruto!" and ran to his side. "It's okay to vent to me. I've got your back." The Uzumaki did this very thing, crying on Shizuka's shoulder. Even though his heart hurt so badly, he sensed that Shizuka was there to comfort him. They remained in that position for who knows how long, but eventually Naruto came to his senses and dried his eyes. Naruto wiped a tear from his cheek and choked out, "Thank you, Shizuka. If not for you, I probably would have reached this destination." Someone smiled, glanced at the body next to her, and then buried it deeper in the snow. "Naruto, don't waste your life dwelling in the past. The past is just that." Naruto looked out over the battlefield and sadly replied, "I let my platoon die, and who knows how many others. When their deaths are on my shoulders, how can I go on living?" Shizuka grabbed Naruto's face so that they were looking each other in the eyes and said, "Look, I will be frank. We may be a year apart in age, but the fact is that we are still kids. We are human, Naruto, and as humans, we are destined for war." Mifune's voice finished for her, "We all make mistakes." Both Naruto and Shizuka rose to their feet to show their respect. "Mifune-sama." The general asked the girl, with a smile on his face, "And who might you be?" Before adding, "I must thank you for helping Naruto in his healing process. Shizuka here, at your service. If I may humbly suggest it, I was once Takeshi's student. Feel free to use whatever information I can provide." Mifune looked at Naruto with a grin on his face and said, "Quite a pick, Uzumaki-san," adding, "She was just the miracle we were looking for." When asked, Naruto nodded and sighed. "If I made a mistake, how many? How many died?" The general grinned and replied, "None. Even an old man like myself makes mistakes time and time again. You need not resign as Commander Uzumaki, and you need not commit seppuku in my presence. What you do need to do is use this experience. Take these burdens which you now bear, and make yourself stronger like many have before your time." The other person returned Naruto's genuine smile for the first time in a while. The daunting task of collecting the fallen began after some time was allotted for prayer for the deceased. Due to the distance from the main village, both enemies and allies were gathered and burned on the same funeral pyre. To ensure everyone's peaceful passage into the afterlife, an honorable ceremony would be held as they burned. It took most of the day, but once Naruto had collected the bodies from the 4 assassins' guilds, he felt a strange sense of calm. The negative effects of his mistake are no longer felt. In a gesture of good faith toward ending this pointless war, Shizuka noted the location of the outpost where she had been stationed for some time and where Fukui Harumasa was most likely located as they wrapped up their conversation. Despite his relief that his master was still with them, Naruto worried that he might not be for much longer. Mifune told Naruto and Shizuka as they were about to separate, "You two will be in charge of the mission, and I want you two to take it on alone." To paraphrase, yes, it is risky, but as you said, Shizuka. Oversight was Takeshi's biggest issue. Good luck, and until we meet again, Uzumaki-san, Shizuka-san. The two prostrated themselves and began walking toward the town. The rest of the day would be spent putting the pieces together, but a solution would be found. To all intents and purposes, the plan was completely absurd, fraught with flaws, and doomed to failure. However, having prior knowledge of Takeshi's oversight problem proved extremely useful. Maybe this strategy would be successful after all. Takeshi's outpost, 1 week later. While being led away to the hideout, Naruto, whose arms are bound at his sides, couldn't help but shake his head and grin. As Naruto watched Shizuka place a sealing scroll containing his swords in one of her pouches, he asked, "Explain to me why we came up with this plan in the first place." "It's been about a year since Takeshi last looked after you." Sweetly, she responded, "Well, for one, it would cement that I was just a way to clear my head, and with you captured it is an added bonus. Think of it as a security measure." This made Naruto chuckle a little as he recalled how they got here. After returning to the village with his companion, Naruto checked himself into the hospital the following morning to make sure the poison that had paralyzed him before wouldn't do so again. Kurama agreed to be blocked even though he hated it. Thus, the injections commenced, and the antidote was administered some hours later. Throughout this procedure, he and Shizuka mapped out the many potential outcomes of their strategy. They needed to establish, for one thing, if Fukui was really present at that outpost. Shizuka disclosed that although Takeshi possessed numerous such items, he knew the location of only Oniya, the one they were planning to rob. As they got closer to the outpost, Naruto picked up a number of underground signatures, but only a small fraction of them were recognizable. However, Naruto noticed that none of them were Fukui's. Naruto was lost in thought when Shizuka harshly whispered, "Stay sharp, we're on in 5." As they approached the fort's gates, the Uzumaki nodded and pretended everything was fine. After 5 minutes, guards stopped them and asked for identification, but their expressions changed to shock upon seeing Shizuka. "Do you have any idea how long Takeshi has been trying to track you down, Shizuka-san?" Shizuka shrugged and gestured to Naruto, "Too long, I suppose. I have an important prisoner for him, and I need to talk to him about a few things." The guards took one look at Naruto's armor and, upon reading the kanji on the back, took a collective breath of fear. Rumors of what this Akuma was capable of had long circulated among the ranks. They hurried Shizuka and her captive inside, where they were met by a couple of rebels who led them to Takeshi's office. In a matter of minutes, they arrived at the door, and after only one knock, Shizuka heard the voice of the man she had grown to despise. "I can't give up now," I told myself. Once it was open, Shizuka pushed her captive inside and locked the door behind her. She kicked Naruto in the back of the knees as the door closed, causing him to bow down to Takeshi. Shizuka said snidely, "That's better, you should know that it's only proper to bow in front of your new master," but she secretly laughed at her own performance. When the rebel leader looked up and saw who was kneeling before him, he cracked a grin. "I knew there had to be a good reason for your departure, but you never failed to surprise me, Shizuka." She was disgusted by what she had to call Takeshi, but she kept up her evil facade for the sake of the operation, saying, "I just needed to clear my head, master. As I was traveling, I came across just the boy you were looking for, whose poor, pea-sized mind was broken after their failed raid on the assassin guilds." Takeshi grinned as he realized his plan to send Mifune their severed heads as an ultimatum was almost too good to be true. "Give in now or end up like the rest of us." The rebel chief scowled at Naruto, "Look at me, demon." Naruto met Takeshi's gaze and then spat in his face. Of course, Shizuka smacked him across the face for this. She even wiped Takeshi's face clean of spittle with a handkerchief she pulled out of thin air, saying, "That demon's filth does not belong on a pretty face like yours." Naruto smirked to himself, "Damn, she's good." As a result of Kurama's remark, Naruto choked up in his head, "You picked quite the vixen, Kit." "Let me spell it out for you, Kurama. She is not my girlfriend. Acquaintances, A. C. Q." Kurama, who was currently rolling around on the forest floor of the mindscape, laughing so hard he could hardly breathe, was unable to respond. Kurama's laughter was amplified by Naruto's internalization of the phrase, "stupid fuzzball." Takeshi grabbed Naruto's chin to bring them face to face again and said, "You know, I have just the special someone down in the dungeons for you to meet." He paused to shout to the guards outside, "In fact, you can share the same cell. Guards, please place our prisoner in that cell. Shizuka, please remain. We have much to discuss." This person nodded, but her inner joy was dancing out. When asked what he would do, Takeshi said, "If he is thinking what I think he will do, then Takeshi just made the biggest oversight of them all. Dungeons. As Naruto was being dragged by the guards to his new location, he took the opportunity to survey his surroundings for potential points of entry. His findings weren't unexpected. Not a good sign, what with all the guards and the fact that the buildings are spread out like a village in the elemental nations, where such spacing is ideal for ambushes. The slam of the cell's metal door and the ritualistic tossing of Naruto inside jolted him out of his thoughts. Once the guards had left and the cell door was locked, Naruto muttered, "Phase 1 done. Interesting, I've been hearing talk of a Phase 1. From the darkness of the cell's corner emerged Fukui Harumasa, a broad grin on his face. Naruto asked, "Master?" With a tone of skepticism. "Hi, I'm an underscore." Before being struck by a heavy blonde and red-haired bullet, Fukui heard the snap of Naruto's rope bindings as he used ki to cut them. Naturally, the Harumasa laughed and gave his student the space he required. After the raid operation, both sides spent the next hour talking about what happened. When his master told Naruto that he would be executed in 2 days and his head sent to Mifune as an ultimatum, the boy was taken aback. Of course, Naruto strongly objected, saying that they would escape and change the course of the war as a result. Even if Naruto didn't realize it at the time, his words would prove prophetic. Fukui smiled wryly and said, "So, referring to Shizuka, by any chance is she your girlfriend?" First Kurama, now you. The answer is. Naruto sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. Both Naruto and Shizuka exclaimed, "No." Simultaneously, which caused both of them to flush. Fukui laughed so hard he had to hold it in. To which she responded, "Oh ho ho, I will take that as a yes. Have I told you how much I hate your master?" Shizuka glared at Naruto's teacher. Naruto's palms immediately began to perspire at the words, "You just met him." Her reply was charming and she smiled. Exactly, first impressions mean everything, don't they? Fukui, amused by the mock outbursts of rage from the fictitious couple, said, "Good pick, I approve. I think we have the makings of a real romance here." Shizuka halted the laughter with the jingle of cell keys, asking, "Did someone order a prison break?" The laughter had stopped. When the door to the cell finally opened, the master and student happily stepped out, only to discover that the guards who had drugged them here had been killed by a slit jugular. A puff of smoke and the placement of Naruto's swords in front of him diverted his attention from the scene. As he stuck them on his right side, Naruto said, "Thank you, Shizuka. A lot of our civilian population and samurai, it seems, have been captured by Takeshi. I sensed some familiar signatures down here." Shizuka snapped back, her anger clear in her voice. He would brainwash them and turn them into soldiers for his cause. Fukui beamed as an idea popped into his head. When asked, "Did anyone order a mutiny?" The trio didn't waste any time and set out to organize the great escape that would ensure Naruto's legend would endure long after the war ended. Shizuka walked around outside acting like she was inspecting buildings when, in reality, she was secretly planting explosive notes. When she was finished, Shizuka went to the bars to gather intelligence from rebels who had been drinking heavily. Mostly it involved figuring out how to break into the fort's heavily guarded arsenal. Explosive tags would be placed once Shizuka was inside to cripple the rebels. It would be a setback for the samurai if they hoped to use this location as a field base in the future, but she knew it would be possible to rebuild. Takeshi had sent Shizuka to the barracks to rouse the troops before the next raid, so that was her next stop. But her plan to enliven the troops didn't involve boosting morale. Rather, she would sow seeds of doubt to make sure the mutiny would sweep the outpost with few casualties. As Shizuka entered the barracks, the thought occurred to her, perhaps I will lead the prisoners to the armory before blowing it up. That might work out all right. Everyone looked at her after she shook her head and cleared her throat. All right, you lot. Listen up. Takeshi is planning a test for all of you, a test which will simulate a raid on this outpost. You will not know when, and you will not be given details of the supposed enemy, and if you fail, Takeshi has tasked me to kill you on the spot. Do I make myself clear? One rebel got cocky and asked, "TCH, who is this bitch?" Without realizing who he was leering at. Looking like some tat. The man's head had fallen to the floor, rendering him unable to move, and his body soon followed. Are we getting this? The terrified rebels in the barracks responded, "Yes, ma'am." Upon hearing this, she walked out of the barracks and said, "Perfect, now to report to Takeshi." Using stealth and precision, Naruto and Fukui killed any guards they encountered and made off with their keys. The prisoners saw the guards go down and celebrated, knowing that they would soon be released from their hellish conditions. Master and apprentice ignored the cheers for the time being and continued on to the dungeon's weapons storage, where Harumasa's swords and many others would be kept. As Fukui did so, he nodded at Naruto, who promptly began unlocking cell doors, releasing a stampede of inmates. Everyone suddenly fell silent as Naruto raised his right hand, holding Hanjo. Naruto beamed as he realized he had their undivided attention and immediately launched into an inspirational speech. It was just one of many things he'd become known for. Join me, no, help me stage the mutiny you so desire, and together we can turn the tide of this war and put an end to Takeshi and his vile ways. What say you, people of Iron Country? Will this mutiny be our last stand? No. There was applause. Rise up, my brothers and sisters and children. Together we will resist this oppression. Together, we can make sure your freedom endures for generations to come. Fukui obviously killed the guards in front of the prisoners as soon as they had completed their task, as the clang of multiple weapons hitting the floor could be heard. Fukui said, indicating the arsenal lying next to the dead guards, "To arms I say. For the Steel State. Iron Country." The inmates shouted and snatched up any weapons they could find. With a force of over 400, and despite being at a slight disadvantage, Fukui and Naruto exchanged knowing glances, knowing that Shizuka would ultimately come through for them. Office of Takeshi. Takeshi asked, with a twisted grin, "So, are you going to stay for the execution in 2 days, Shizuka? I will even let you do the honors." "You flatter me, and I would gladly join you again, Takeshi-sama." The two had been conversing for 10 minutes, the majority of which consisted of a heated back and forth about past and future dealings in this war. However, with Shizuka's last statement, Takeshi realized that the conversation had taken an unexpected turn. "Shizuka, why are you hesitating?" The insurgent leader glared angrily at his former student. "Oh, Takeshi," she said, laughing, before taking a deep breath to compose herself. "One of your fatal flaws was your tendency to overlook things." Shizuka was amused by her use of a chakra flare to cause explosions that leveled the outpost. "You whore. And now look at you." Takeshi glared at Shizuka before stabbing him in the chest with his katana. Shizuka spat blood in her master's face, but it was what she said next that made Takeshi swear. The proverb goes, "Never trust your own apprentice." A war cry sounded, prompting the rebel leader to look out his window at the miniature village below. The prisoners had escaped and were making their way to the armory, and the outpost had been lost. Zetsu said as he suddenly materialized in front of the target, "Master will not be pleased, Takeshi. When Master is finished with you, you will make the perfect appetizer for me." Takeshi growled, "Shut up and get me out of here." The prisoners entered the office as Zetsu sighed and grabbed the rebel leader, and the two disappeared. And Fukui, both of Naruto's. As the two of them and their followers emerged from the depths of the dungeons, Naruto saw Shizuka motion to him, and he knew it was time to take the lead. The explosions had already broken the rebels up into smaller groups that would be easier to deal with, but the whole thing was still almost like shooting fish in a barrel for the mutiny forces. "Take my advice." With a nod and a wave of his hand, Naruto led the way. As in, "Hi sir." They obeyed with a resounding chorus. During their time at the armory, the civilians abandoned the weapons they had in favor of those they were trained to use. They now carried bows and arrows, maces, clubs, axes, and pretty much anything else that resembled the tools of their trade. Naruto had a plan, and Fukui gave him control. With a broad grin on his face, Naruto's sensei thought, "A test for you, Naruto, a test to see if you are truly worthy in taking that next step. I command all archers to immediately take refuge in the highest buildings they can find. 2 samurai and 2 civilians will accompany each person. Separate into 20-person squads, the rest. I'd like for both to count equally. Compare yourself to Master Harumasa or myself, if you must. Do I convey my meaning? As in, hi sir. I know many of you will not live to see the results of today, but rest assured that you died with honor and that your sacrifice will not be in vain," Naruto said with a grim smile. "For the Steel State. Iron Country." After that, everyone split up into their respective groups, with the archers making haste to their positions while the squads of 20 went out and slaughtered any rebels they came across. This was especially true for Naruto and Fukui's squad, which had more samurai than civilians in it. There was no hope for the rebels. When Naruto reached the first group, he didn't even draw his katana. Instead, he used his ki like a blade and performed aikido to dance around the enemies until they looked like they'd been through a blender. Those who tried to get behind them were cut down by the civilians' accurate bow and arrow fire, which the samurai in the groups directed. Shizuka decided to keep the armory and head into the fight as Fukui dispatched his opponents in a manner reminiscent of Naruto's, and the civilians slaughtered the rebels with the savagery of savages. As she began to spin around at incredible speed, she said, "Fools." Performance of dance. The next step. When Shizuka slowed and landed on the ground, she waved to the people on the roof, who waved back. Satisfied, she ran off to see if Naruto and Fukui needed any help. Trouble for Naruto and his group began when assassins intervened while Fukui's group was thinning out the rebel resistance on their side. "These same jerks again," Naruto shouted as he dodged a dagger thrust and blocked a second with Hanjo. As the assassin went in for the jugular, Naruto made himself fall to the ground and snap-kicked the dagger out of the assassin's hand. Just as the assassin was going to grab it out of the air, he quickly found his hand to be gone. Any screams that escaped his throat were instantly silenced upon Hanjo going through his throat. Sensing enemies around him, Naruto calmly initiated his Tatehiza no Biyu. As the enemies rushed in, Naruto closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and he performed a mix of many of the vaza, some having ki added to them. When all was said and done, he breathed in deep as he sheathed Hanjo slowly. Once it clicked, he opened his eyes and watched as 10 assassins fell to the snowy ground dead around him. Any civilians and samurai watching the ordeal couldn't help but blink in awe, not only at how calm the young commander handled the situation, but also on his perfect swordsmanship. Not one slice was wasted. Those that watched felt the urge to fight even harder, one which they pronounced with a war cry. The cry, which the other mutiny forces joined in on, was music to Naruto, Fukui, and Shizuka's ears. Shizuka landed next to Naruto, who had just gotten out of his Tatehiza no Biyu, and she said, "Hey, I see you are enjoying yourself." As more assassins closed in, Naruto smiled back and sighed. "Do they never grow up? It looks like our first dance will have to happen sooner than we planned." Naruto laughed nervously and took his position as Shizuka assumed hers, saying, "This is awkward on so many levels." As they went back to back, Shizuka replied, "Get used to it, I think we will be together for a long time." With that, Naruto and Shizuka started dancing together for the first time. Somewhere in the heart of steel, Tobi emerged from the ground with an irritated expression on his face and a spinning mangekyu, which Takeshi and Zetsu had just emerged from. "En nu Tobi. I can expletive." As Takeshi struggled in vain to free himself from Toba's choking grip, the enraged Uchiha continued his tirade. Tobi had had enough and grabbed the rebel leader by the throat, lifting him in the air so that they were eye to eye. "I put my faith in you, Takeshi, to do one thing, make sure Iron Country fell. After this latest blunder, I have to wonder if all my efforts were wasted on the likes of you." Takeshi was knocked to the floor and had to cough several times to regain his breath. "The Nine Tails brat's strength exceeds our expectations, Tobi. I've never seen anyone so in command of the beast, or so capable of rallying the troops to his cause." The Uchiha squinted at Takeshi and said, "Valid points. Very well, I will give you one last chance, Takeshi. 1. I am not easily persuaded to show mercy." Takeshi was left alone and clueless after Tobi vanished in Kamui and Zetsu disappeared into the ground, but he eventually grunted and got to his feet, deciding to locate his nearest outpost from here. Sunset. Naruto style. Only 10 people died during the mutiny, and only 2 were samurai who were killed by assassins. The rest were civilians. After Naruto and Shizuka's dance, it only took another 30 minutes until the outpost was theirs. Once they made sure all the rebels were dealt with, they buried and disposed of the enemy's corpses while separating theirs, which would be properly buried the following morning. Who would be in charge of this outpost? One person's speech quickly settled the issue, and that person is now sitting in Takeshi's old chair, gaping in disbelief. "What?" A civilian spoke up, and many others nodded in agreement, saying, "You heard us right, Naruto-san, we want you to become our leader." Using his hands to signal, "No," Naruto said, "I'm only a child, a mere 12 years old." A samurai twice Naruto's age pleaded with him, "Please Naruto-san, I speak for everyone here. You are a child that showed us the courage to fight, and even led us to victory. It's here." The many co-workers said something that put a smile on Shizuka and Fukui's faces. Both were currently supporting Naruto, but it appeared he wouldn't require it. Kurama saw his containers struggling while Naruto sighed and contemplated the enormous task before him. Kit, just do it. They need a role model, Naruto, and you have given them that in the time of need, Kurama said from the cave in the mindscape. You are more than ready to lead these people. Does your ranting in that cell hold no weight? After giving Kurama's words some thought, Naruto smiled, inspiring hope in the hearts of the freed civilians and samurai. The Uzumaki then unsheathed Hanjo partially, cut his left palm open, causing it to bleed, displayed the wound to the assembled crowd in his office, and issued his decree. As of right now, I, Naruto Uzumaki, Akuma no Senshi, am in charge of the battlefield. And by the droplets of blood on my hand, I swear it. As his co-workers cheered and ran to share the good news, Naruto was overcome with emotion and couldn't hold back the tears.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.